Imagine this. It's 100,000 years ago. You've just risked your life chasing a half-ton chunk of mammoth with a pointy stick that looks like it came from IKEA's clearance bin. You're starving, cold, and covered in mud. But here's the catch. You don't automatically get the first bite of that delicious mammoth steak sizzling on the fire. No. In your tribe, who gets fed first isn't decided by brute strength or hunting skills. It's decided by, brace yourself, elaborate S3XUAL rituals. Yes. In a world without Netflix, deodorant, or even chairs, humans came up with rituals so strange, so awkward, that entire survival hierarchies revolved around who was kissing, dancing, or, let's say, ritually demonstrating fertility in front of everyone else. Imagine going on Survivor, except the prize isn't $1 million, it's the marrow bone. And also, Chad next to you is trying to seduce the group elder by shaking his butt in the firelight. Now, before you panic and turn off the video, don't worry. You're not about to get a biology lecture. You're here to fall asleep. Think of this like a bedtime story. Your history teacher was too afraid to tell you. The soothing narration of bizarre prehistoric rituals, mixed with gentle humor, soft descriptions, and just enough curiosity to make you wonder, how did we ever survive this long? So, tuck in, adjust your blanket, close your eyes if you want, and let me guide you into the strange, funny, and occasionally very sweaty world of prehistoric bedroom politics that decided who got to eat first. The night is velvet and patient, the kind of dark that doesn't rush you, doesn't demand anything except a long breath and another, and maybe another after that. Out on the steppe, the wind moves over the grass like a sleepy hand smoothing a blanket, and the stars seem unusually nosy about what's happening by the fire. There are people here, your people, though you borrowed them only for the length of a story, curled around orange light, the way cats curl around warm windows. Smoke climbs, sparks lift, and the day's mud hardens into a comfortable crust on shin bones and ankles. The smell is a little orchestra, roasted fat humming the low notes, damp hide playing a shy middle, sage on the edge of the hearth, keeping time like a small wooden rattle. Someone yawns that heavy prehistoric yawn that starts in the toes and ends in the eyebrows. Somewhere beyond the glow, in a ring of darkness with opinions, the wolves make their throat music. The wolves are patient too. Nobody is quite talking yet. There's a pre-word silence that old groups know well, the way you know the pause before the music swells. The elder sits nearest the embers, eyes reflecting the fire like polished seeds. Their hair is braided with feathers that have seen better days and worse winters. A small child, very much off stage for our purposes tonight, sleeps across someone's lap, blissfully unaware of all the contracts adults make with starlight and hunger. And you, wide awake in your modern bed, get to float above this scene like a sleepy hawk, close enough to hear the crackle, far enough to feel safe. The fire pops, ash drifts, the night leans in. There's meat. That's important. It's wrapped in the scent of smoke and patience, resting on sticks that were carved smooth, with a flake of flint, as sharp as common sense. This meat is the afterglow of enormous, inconvenient heroism. Earlier today, several humans chased something that had absolutely no plans to be dinner, and now, because of teamwork, good aim, and a level of cardio no treadmill class can replicate, there's a feast. It isn't a word they use, but it's the right feeling salt on the tongue, relief behind the eyes. You can feel that relief from here, the way your shoulders drop when the last email of the day goes out, and your brain replaces the spinning wheel with a hammock. But the important question is not whether there is food. It's who eats first and why. And this is where things get wonderfully odd. If you're imagining a line where the biggest biceps step up like VIPs at a club, that's one way to do it. But this camp has its own algorithms. They're older than passwords and harder to hack. Here, precedence isn't just about who stabbed the animal or who ran the farthest. It's about who carried a song across the winter, who kept the arguments from blossoming into fist-shaped flowers, who danced the story that kept the sun courageous. And yes, who brought desire into the circle, the way you bring kindling, carefully, playfully, and without setting the whole step on fire. You can see the rules in motion, even if nobody scrolls them on a tablet. In this tribe, as in many, and not only prehistoric ones, status often shuffles and reshuffles around the campfire, according to rituals that braid fertility, humor, and social glue. Desire isn't a private little candle in a back room. It's a public choreography, with boundaries understood like the edges of a cliff at dusk. We are not here for graphic detail. We are here for the theater of it, the way a look can be a generous loaf, and a gesture can be a treaty. The participants are consenting adults. This is important and non-negotiable in our mindful bedtime story, who've learned that making courtship visible can tame the sharp elbows of scarcity. It's the oldest HR policy. Keep the harmony, and the marrow will flow. Watch how they arrange themselves, without anyone announcing a seating chart. The elder's partner call them the keeper of embers, because titles help people sleep. Passes a carved bone ladle over each bowl, a floating bless you of grease, as if inscribing a gentle promise over the meal. A pair of hunters exchange a glance, not of competition, but of, we did that. The compact grin you know from group projects that miraculously worked. A singer hums the start of a tune that has stopped fights more reliably than any fence. And then there's the ritual, capital R, only because we need a handle to lift it with. It's not explicit, it's expressive. It's not about anatomy, it's about accord. It's the kind of thing that invites laughter without humiliation and invites affection without coercion. Picture, if you will, a dance you could perform in a blanket and a good mood, a spiral in the dust, feet whispering, shoulders telling a story about rain that fell on time. Hands reach, then pause, then retreat, then return, a negotiation so gentle it could teach diplomats. The jokes are soft, like moss on a log. Someone imitates the mammoth's shocked face upon discovering aerodynamic spears. Someone else tells a story about the first person to discover garlic on a lark and accidentally invent cuisine. And threaded through the humor is the serious business of attraction, ritualized into a public service. The same way a modern society asks people to line up at a voting booth and make a private choice with a public consequence. Here, the consequence is cohesion. Cohesion is dinner. You might be wondering how desire and dinner got mixed in the same pot, and whether that's practical or just prehistoric performance art. It's surprisingly practical. Food is power, and power, without a leash, can bite the hand that feeds it. If you let the strongest always eat first, you train the tribe to worship bruises. If you let the loudest shout their way to the marrow, you train the tribe to value thunder over rain. But if you grant first bites to those who keep the fabric from tearing, those who manage love and laughter, who model consent and care, who turn rivalry into rehearsal. You send a message into the bones of the group. Here, tenderness is not a luxury. It is infrastructure. So there's a moment again, strictly adult, strictly consensual, strictly ceremonial, when 2 or 3 performers step into the band of light and play their part. It's half dance, half joke, not unlike the courtship displays you see in birds, minus the feathers, and plus an impressive knowledge of where to stand, so your shadow looks heroic. They lean in, lean out, swap places, mirror each other, until the whole camp is breathing at the same tempo. There's an electricity to it, but not the sort that zaps your nervous system awake. More like the thrum of bees in clover. The elder watches for balance. Nobody overshadowed, nobody coerced. The human never knifing, but always needing. When it's done, the performers bow with a silliness that tells you the tension has been cooked soft. The embers wink their tiny red eyes. A ladle moves. The first bowl's honors of the night go to those who made everyone safer, kinder, closer, and honestly, that's the sort of meritocracy your pillow can get behind. Notice how none of this prevents the hunters from eating heartily. They will, and gratefully. Notice how nobody is punished for not performing. Rituals work because they're invitations with clear doorways, not traps with hidden hinges. Tonight, the honor passes this way. Tomorrow, perhaps, it passes to the woman who figured out how to dry meat in a way that doesn't taste like a shoe, or to the quiet man whose stories turn panic into patience. Power circulates like heat in a good hearth, and the tribe keeps learning that love isn't something you hoard, it's something you put into the air so everyone can breathe. You can feel your own breath sinking with the camps as the fire settles. The wolves move farther off, bored or respectful or convinced by the scent of 20 contented humans that there are easier dinners elsewhere. Someone begins a new song that sounds, from your distance, like a blanket being shaken out and spread. You catch yourself smiling not at the sizzle of scandal, which we are not here for, but at the simplicity of it all. Grown people with an instruction manual made of gestures, rediscovering every night that kindness is the shortest path between hunger and sleep. Your blankets are warm, your eyelids practice becoming clouds. The story shifts softly to the part where we wonder why sharing food ever needed ceremony at all. And the answer arrives on quiet feet. Because ceremony slows us down just enough to see each other. And seeing each other is how we remember to share. If you're drifting, let yourself drift. The step is very wide, the stars very patient, and the ladle is still circling, drawing arcs of light over bowls held by hands that have built huts, buried friends, thrown spears, braided hair, and learned the ancient grammar of after you. Somewhere, someone laughs without edge. Somewhere, fat hisses as it meets flame and turns into vapor and blessing. In a minute, we'll talk about why food sharing was complicated enough to need choreography. For now, let the smoke write its cursive in the night and feel your own heartbeat match the rhythm of feet in dust. Gentle, human, ongoing. Hunger complicates otherwise sensible people. It's basically biology's way of sending you a strongly worded email. In the Ice Age inbox, those messages arrived hourly. Energy in had to match energy out with ruthless arithmetic, and the margin for error was as thin as the edge of a flint blade. When a day's hunt succeeded, a small economy blossomed around the carcass. Calories became a currency, and distribution was not a side note, it was governance. If you've ever watched modern adults split a pizza after moving furniture, you already know that fairness matters more when your triceps feel like boiled noodles. Now multiply that by a winter, by a homeland that moves with the herds, by a pantry whose walls are made of weather. You can see why the people by our fire braided rules as carefully as they braided cordage. The simplest method would be first come, first served. But first come, first served rewards. Sprinting, not sustaining. It tempts the already strong to become hoarders, and the already hungry to take risks they can't afford. Another method would be strict hierarchy. The chief gets the choicest cut, then lieutenants, then everyone else can attempt to become soup. That works until the chief's nephew has a personality like a thorn bush, and morale melts faster than snow in a hand. Yet another method would be pure egalitarianism, equal shares for all, regardless of effort, skill, or need. Your moral heart might applaud, but your pragmatic stomach raises an eyebrow. Some people are nursing, some are injured, some just ran the final mile, with a toothy problem in pursuit. Equity isn't always equal, and survival is a spreadsheet in which every column is labeled, "It depends." Prehistoric folks solved this, not with an app, but with living protocols that made sense in the bone. One such protocol placed meat distribution inside a basket of relationships. Your status was not what you took, it was the trust you invested and returned. Rituals that bundled attraction, humor, and public accountability were less about romance than about reinforcing interdependence. They said, in choreography, instead of bullet points, we rise by making one another rise. If your performance tonight was to bring levity to a tense circle, your bite of liver rich in iron, the original multivitamin, signaled the group's agreement that your gift was as necessary as hamstrings. If another's performance was to model attentive partnership again, strictly adult, strictly consensual, the narrative keeps its shirt on. Then their bowl came early, because commitment is a form of shelter, and shelters deserve maintenance. It helped that the elders played sommelier with the cuts, offering not just portions, but meanings. Ribs to the person who had spent the afternoon thawing a quiet feud between neighboring bedrolls. Tongue to the storyteller, whose memory carried ancestral paths to springs. Marrow bones to the pair whose dance, equal parts, comedy and competence, reminded everyone that intimacy without kindness is just friction, and friction alone won't keep a winter at bay. This wasn't some prudish censor board or a free-for-all. It was a series of signals reminding everyone that appetite, in all its forms, is safest when it is nested inside care. Because here's the messy truth hunger teaches. The person who eats first tonight might be the person who carries someone tomorrow. Maybe the hunter with the heroic throw's elbow will swell overnight. Maybe the singer will wake with a sore throat. Maybe the keeper of embers will take a fall on the ice and need 2 pairs of shoulders to fetch water. The tribe therefore treated food like a loan with generous terms. Favors were remembered, burdens were shared, interest accrued, as stories told and dances danced. You could pay your debts with laughter, with instruction, with craft. If you were a napper who could take a sullen piece of chert and coax from it 10 identical points, you bought dinners for days. If you were a navigator who could sense west by the way your skin interpreted breeze, the tribe's gratitude tasted like fat seeping into charcoal. Scarcity, however, is a gremlin that loves loopholes. What about freeloaders? What about the charming dancer who winked their way to extra portions and then forgot to carry water. The system had answers without needing courts. Reputation, in a small group, is stickier than pitch. If your contributions lacked substance, the laughter around you thinned. Rituals welcomed you with narrower doorways, your bowl still filled, because no one starved on purpose. Mutual aid isn't a mood, but the choicest bites drifted elsewhere, like smoke, following a different wind. And if you grew, over time, from charming to generous, the tribe noticed with relief and recalibrated. The ledger was both strict and soft, a paradox that modern spreadsheets envy. Sometimes fairness wore a more formal face. Certain pieces were earmarked. The heart might go to the person whose courage tipped the hunt from neck deep in trouble to a story we'll soon exaggerate. Liver often went to those with pressing nutritional need, because even a camp that used ritual to sexualize the evening understood that bodies run on chemistry, not poetry. Elders, those steady libraries, with knees like old leather, received early servings, because their advice had saved more lives than anyone's spear. The ritual didn't replace practicality. It wrapped it in gratitude, so that no one mistook necessity for favoritism. Gratitude is what keeps a rule from becoming a bully. There's another layer to all this. Hushed under the blanket of the night like a second quilt, the way public play diffuses private jealousy. Desire can be a mischievous river. In secret channels it cuts banks, steals soil, changes maps without consent. Bring it to the fire, give it form and permission and edges, and it becomes irrigation. The dance is funny, which is important. It is consensual, which is foundational. It is watched by aunties, whose raised eyebrows are older than thunder, which is a deterrent against foolishness. You learn, as a participant, that your charm belongs to the group as much as your strong back. You learn, as an onlooker, that intimacy can be celebrated without making anyone small. And above all, you learn, as a hungry human, that your next bite depends on the health of the invisible threads between you. Modern parallels are everywhere once you're drowsy enough to see them. Office birthday cakes, sliced by the person who remembers everyone's allergies. Potlucks organized by the colleague who can coax a shy intern into telling a story. Family dinners, where the peacemaker mysteriously receives the crispiest roast potato. We pretend our distribution systems are spreadsheets and contracts. And they are. But under the hood, we're still trading jokes for calories, still rewarding the patient, still feeding the glue. If you imagine envy seething here, someone muttering that the dancer always eats first, remember that we're looking at a system with rotation built in. Some nights, the ceremony highlights the inventor who glued stone to wood with resin and sinew and changed the ratio of risk to reward. Some nights it honors the weather reader whose nose, like a barometer with a personality, spared the camp a flood. Some nights, when the world is too hard for jokes, the ritual collapses into a simple sharing, and the first bite passes to the person carrying grief. Grief eats first, because grief has the smallest appetite and needs persuading. That's a wisdom we keep forgetting and remembering, like a song that returns every spring. You might worry, tucked where you are, that tossing desire and duty into the same basket could backfire. It could, and sometimes did. That's why boundaries were part of the ritual's choreography. Adults only. Consent audible, even over crackling fat. Options to bow out without penalty. To gift your role to someone else, with a squeeze of the hand and a nod. The tribe had 1,000 micro-techniques for steering nights back toward kindness. A cough from the elder, a joke from the singer, a sudden fascination with repairing a sandal strap. You've done this too at dinner parties, when conversations drift toward cliffs. We like to imagine our ancestors as either feral or saintly. They were neither. They were us with fewer cupboards and better star knowledge, continuously inventing manners to keep appetite from making enemies of neighbors. In the calm after distribution, bones crack between stones to get at the hidden wealth. Someone drips marrow into a bowl of boiled roots, turns the mixture with a stick until it shines, and passes it to the person who spent the day weaving cordage, hands moving like clever spiders. The spoon reaches every mouth. The dogs get their share at the very end, because they are family members with opinions and excellent noses. Satisfaction replaces the jangly alertness of famine. Voices drop a register. You can feel your own body following suit, sliding toward that good heaviness, where blankets behave like friendly gravity. Fairness has a taste, and it's this: rich, smoky, touched with sweat, salted with laughter. Before the fire thins, there's a last small ritual that has nothing to do with desire and everything to do with debt. A story is told about the first winter after a long summer, when the group almost forgot how to be generous, and the wolves started testing the perimeter with bolder steps. In the story, an elder pretended to be hungrier than they were, until the tribe noticed the wrongness of it and corrected course. The moral isn't scolding, it's a lullaby for the conscience. We remember what we practice, and we practice what we celebrate. Tonight, they celebrated choreography as governance, tenderness as technology, joking as infrastructure, and food as a vote of confidence in one another's tomorrows. You, who came here to drift, can let the ledger close. The equations balance, for now. The bowls are clean, rinsed with warm stones, dropped into water until it thinks about steaming. The bones that remain will become tools or flutes, or a lesson in how to make use of everything and waste only a little pride. The people settle onto their bedding with the satisfied, slightly stunned quiet that follows a day that almost didn't work and then did. And if a breeze meanders through camp, nosing at banked coals and the last low conversation, it carries with it the scent of a social contract older than writing and kinder than conquest. We eat because we make each other possible. Sleep can borrow that contract. Your breath divides the night into equal shares. Your pillow distributes comfort to the muscles that labored. Somewhere in you, the elder with the reflective eyes ladles out calm first to the part that smoothed the day's quarrels, then to the part that kept time, then to the part that remembered to laugh. Fairness has many flavors. Tonight, they all taste like rest. The fire burns low, and the shadows stretch long across the packed earth of the camp. You might assume that the person with the bulkiest muscles, the one who can toss a rock the size of a pumpkin or chase down an antelope until it faints from exhaustion, would be the unquestioned ruler of this little human universe. After all, in modern action movies, it's always the muscular hero who gets to glare meaningfully and hold the camera's attention. But back then, when life itself was a group project and the deadlines were every sunrise, things were far more complicated. Biceps were useful, yes. They could haul wood, carry carcasses, and swat an overeager wolf on the nose. But muscles were not enough to organize a tribe, keep it calm through lean winters, or persuade everyone that eating boiled roots again was better than starting a riot. Power, in its most practical form, was often measured not in the size of a man's chest, but in the size of his memory, the depth of her wisdom, or the way someone could quiet a crowd with a story. The elder who had survived 40 winters, whose back cracked like a percussion instrument every time they stood up, held more weight in the camp than the young warrior with a six-pack. Elders remembered where the rivers hid even in drought years. They remembered the rhythm of the seasons, which valleys had more berries, and which mushrooms would nourish, instead of providing the world's shortest comedy show. They were the original search engines, but with more wrinkles and fewer cookies stored. Then there were shamans. You might think of them as early therapists crossed with weather forecasters and part-time DJs. Their job was not lifting heavy stones, but lifting heavy doubts. When the wind howled all night, when children cried with fevers, when someone fell from a tree and broke more bones than anyone cared to count, the shaman had to step forward. They carried knowledge about herbs, about the strange buzzing inside the head that could be soothed with chanting or smoke. They also carried authority, not because they were necessarily stronger than anyone else, but because they convinced the group that unseen forces could be persuaded, bribed, or tickled into cooperation. In a way, their greatest muscle was imagination. Ritual knowledge itself was another kind of power, one that didn't need to flex in the mirror. Whoever controlled the ceremonies controlled the rhythm of life. If you knew how to lead the harvest dance that made everyone believe the rains would come, you weren't just entertaining the neighbors. You were anchoring morale, giving the tribe a reason to keep sowing seeds instead of sulking in despair. Imagine if every office had one person who knew the secret recipe for Company Spirit Week that kept everyone working instead of plotting to quit. That's the kind of leverage ritual knowledge gave. And sometimes, the most powerful figure in camp wasn't the strongest or even the wisest, but the one who could string those things together with charisma. The person who could laugh at themselves when the fire smoke got in their eyes, who could smooth over tension with a joke, who could take a touchy subject like food distribution and make it feel like a game. Think of it as the prehistoric version of the person who brings donuts to the meeting. That donut bringer is untouchable. You can't fire them. You can't even glare at them for being late. They've got sprinkles, and you don't. So the hierarchy was complex. Hunters had strength, yes, but elders had memory. Shamans had mystery, and those with ritual knowledge had the ability to turn raw survival into a story worth repeating. All of these forms of power danced together like shadows on the firelight. Never entirely predictable, but always essential. If you're lying there now, wondering how you would have ranked in such a system, don't worry. You might not have been the one who speared the mammoth, but maybe you'd be the one who remembered the safe waterhole, or who knew how to coax laughter out of a grumpy uncle. In those days, that was enough to get you a decent portion of marrow, and maybe even a front row seat at the rituals that defined the tribe. Later, when the embers flared again, and night wrapped the camp like a woolen cloak, you could see the rituals begin. They didn't come out of nowhere. They were the natural extension of people trying to make sense of life with nothing but their voices, their bodies, and the occasional percussion section of hollow logs. The earliest ceremonies were rarely subtle. They were loud, exaggerated, often hilarious, and sometimes scandalous. But they served a serious purpose. They reminded everyone of fertility, of abundance, of life pushing forward, even when winter growled in the distance. Take the dances, for instance. Under the dim light, a group might gather, stamping their feet in rhythm, circling the fire with exaggerated movements. Some of those steps were meant to imitate animals, crouching like deer, stomping like mammoths, leaping like grasshoppers on caffeine. But others carried a different kind of symbolism, a playful mimicry of courtship and reproduction. Yes, that's right. Even in the Stone Age, humans had discovered that if you add a little S3XUAL comedy to the evening entertainment, the audience stays awake longer. Think of it as history's first slapstick rom-com, except performed with bone rattles and awkward grunts. These fertility ceremonies weren't just about giggles, though. They carried the heavy responsibility of hope. When the tribe saw dancers exaggerating the act of creation, they weren't only laughing. They were reminded that children were still being born, that seeds would sprout again, that despite the constant threat of hunger, there was a future. Watching your neighbors wiggle and prance might have felt silly, but deep inside, it was comforting. Laughter and reassurance often ride the same horse. And then came the firelight performances, which blended storytelling with ritual. Someone would step forward, maybe the shaman, maybe the elder, and begin to act out myths of origin. They'd tell how the first woman coaxed the sun out of hiding with a song, or how the first man tricked the rain into falling by performing a ridiculous dance involving antlers. The stories were punctuated with movements, some sensual, some comic, some solemn. The audience would laugh, gasp, and nod. The children would fall asleep halfway through, drooling happily into their mothers' hides. The adults would watch, reminded that their lives were woven into something bigger, stranger, and more meaningful than just digging for roots all day. These performances often turned the entire camp into both stage and audience. One moment you were watching, the next, you were part of the line, stomping, clapping, exaggerating your hips, until everyone wheezed with laughter. Consent and participation mattered. Nobody was forced into the spotlight, but those who joined added their own energy to the ritual. It was chaotic and democratic, silly and sacred. Picture karaoke night, but instead of singing Sweet Caroline, you're acting out the courtship habits of mammoths to ensure next year's hunt is blessed. To us, these ceremonies might seem comical, maybe even embarrassing, but to them, they were both survival strategy and spiritual therapy. They bound the tribe together. They taught young people about adulthood in a safe, performative context. They diffused jealousy and tension by turning desire into theater instead of conflict, and they gave everyone something to look forward to after a day of relentless labor. So when you imagine these early humans circling their fires, remember that their rituals were not mindless superstition. They were carefully evolved social tools. They were ways of laughing at fear, of making fertility into art, of transforming hunger and danger into community. And though the costumes were minimal, the choreography improvised, and the jokes a little earthy, the result was something that soothed hearts, strengthened bonds, and, in a way, ensured that the tribe could fall asleep each night, believing that tomorrow was worth waking for. The thought of it arrives almost uninvited. A prehistoric dance floor, the fire flickering like a lazy strobe light, and someone deciding the moment calls for what we today might call a twerk. Except there are no sequin shorts, no polished club tiles. There are mammoth hide leggings, stitched together with sinew, smelling faintly of smoke and fat, and probably not designed for high-impact choreography. Imagine the scene. The leggings are thick, stiff from the cold, and squeak like a leather armchair every time the hips attempt anything ambitious. The audience, your fellow tribespeople, stares with a mixture of awe and second-hand embarrassment. The fire pops, a child giggles, and someone mutters that perhaps mammoths died out, not because of hunters, but because their skins were pressed into service for experimental dancewear. Now, this image is funny because it collides our modern sense of performance with the raw, clumsy, material reality of Ice Age life. But beneath the humor is something important. These dances were not frivolous displays. They were expressions of vitality, fertility, and belonging. If your leggings squeaked like a door hinge every time you bent your knees, well, that was part of the comedy. Laughter itself was ritual, loosening tensions after long days of hunger and cold. Nobody expected elegance. They expected participation. The act of moving your body, no matter how silly it looked, mattered more than technical perfection. And so, when you imagine that unfortunate dancer trying to shake their hips in prehistoric couture, remember that the tribe was not judging them on the smoothness of their moves. They were judging them on their willingness to be part of the communal spectacle, to join in, to risk embarrassment, to sweat in unflattering pants for the sake of shared amusement. This was the currency of trust. You could miss a beat. You could slip on an icy patch of dirt. You could even end up inventing slapstick comedy 300 millennia before Charlie Chaplin. As long as you showed up, you were investing in the collective spirit. Participation, in this sense, was more than entertainment. It was respect. The rituals that knitted tribes together worked only if everyone, from the hunters with sore shoulders to the elders with stiff knees, found some way to contribute. The loudest might sing. The shyest might keep rhythm by drumming on a log. The children imitated adults with exaggerated seriousness, their own small bodies declaring, "I belong here too," and the dancer in mammoth hide. They were reminding everyone that joy, even awkward joy, had a place besides survival. Respect was not distributed according to who looked the most graceful. It was distributed according to who had the courage to play their part. Rituals were the glue, and participation was the adhesive surface. Without it, the whole camp might splinter. Imagine the suspicion that would spread if certain people refused to join. It would feel like withholding, like a statement that they considered themselves above the group. In a world where survival required every pair of hands and every warm body, arrogance was a dangerous signal. The tribe needed humility in motion, even if that humility squeaked like mammoth leggings being pushed to their limits. What emerges here is a deeper truth. Ritual equaled respect. To participate was to declare that you accepted the tribe's authority, its traditions, its fragile cohesion. If you chose to sit silently and decline, the message was not neutral. It was potentially rebellious. People might whisper that you had grown distant, that you were hiding something, that you were not dependable. And dependability was everything, when tomorrow's hunt might determine whether anyone had the strength to dance again at all. So rank in the tribe wasn't carved only from hunting prowess or knowledge of herbs. It was also shaped by who stepped into the circle and made the firelight their partner. Those who danced, who told stories, who joined the rituals with open hearts, were seen as pillars of the community. They received not just food, but trust. Their opinions carried weight because they had shown, over and over, that they would stand with the group, no matter how silly the leggings, no matter how exhausting the day. There were hierarchies, yes, but they were softer than the iron cages we often imagine. An elder who could not dance anymore might still sit at the edge of the circle and clap in time. Their wrinkled hands patting rhythm into the night were just as respected as a younger body leaping around with the reckless abandon of youth. The ritual made room for everyone, and in doing so, it tested everyone's commitment. The respect generated here was not abstract. It had tangible outcomes. A person who participated faithfully, who could be relied on to join the dances, the chants, the firelit ceremonies, often found themselves listened to in council. Their voice mattered when decisions were made about where to migrate, when to hunt, whom to trust as allies. It wasn't simply because they had rhythm. It was because they had proven loyalty in a language older than words. They had given themselves to the group in public, embodied form. And when you give yourself that way, people remember. Of course, not all performances were graceful, and humor softened the edges. When someone tripped and landed in the dust, the laughter that followed was not cruel. It was affectionate, the kind of laughter that says, "We see you. We accept you. We love that you tried." In fact, the ones who could make others laugh often rose in respect quickly. Comic relief was survival too. If you could transform embarrassment into shared amusement, you had alchemy at your fingertips. Respect clung to those who brought lightness in heavy times. Now, imagine lying there in the dark of your own room, listening to the echoes of this distant circle. The fire pops, the drum beats, someone squeaks across the dirt in mammoth hide. You smile, because the sound is absurd, but it is also human, and you understand that this ridiculous spectacle carried a sacred weight. Ritual equaled respect, participation equaled status, and the tribe was kept whole not by fear or violence, but by the gentle insistence that everyone, in their own way, join the dance. When you picture those leggings straining, when you imagine the sweat and the awkward angles, remember that it wasn't humiliation, it was devotion. The dancer was not lowering themselves. They were raising the tribe. They were saying, "I will look silly if that is what it takes to keep us together." That is what earned them the right to eat, the right to be heard, the right to be respected. In that firelight, respect was not about domination. It was about contribution. And so, as your eyes grow heavier, think of how fragile our ancestors' lives were, balanced on cold winds and scarce food. They invented rituals, even humorous ones, to hold each other close. To join was to belong. To laugh together was to survive together. And whether you danced gracefully or squeaked like furniture in mammoth leggings, the tribe loved you for showing up. That love was respect. That respect was life. Picture yourself lying back, eyelids heavy, the glow of your phone still buzzing on your nightstand. Maybe you've swiped today. Maybe you haven't. Maybe you've stared at profile after profile, all of them polished, edited, and curated, like tiny museum exhibits of human possibility. Some smile with perfect teeth, some pose with pets, some declare they are adventurous or love to laugh, and then your eyes close, and suddenly you're transported back 50,000 years. There is no phone, no Wi-Fi, no tiny green dot that says online. Instead, there's a fire. Sparks drift upward like lazy fireflies. People are gathering in a circle, and the same thing is happening in its own prehistoric way. Humans are still advertising themselves, still hoping to be chosen, still figuring out how to make "I'm a good mate" sound appealing. If a dating app profile today is a photo plus a bio, a ritual dance back then was body paint plus rhythm. Instead of filters that softened skin tones, they used crushed ochre, smeared in bright reds, across cheeks and chests. Instead of witty one-liners like, "looking for someone to share tacos with," they had feathers stuck in their hair, bone beads rattling on ankles, and a dance step that said, "Look at me. I have strong knees and good balance, which means I can probably survive long enough to raise children." It was primitive, yes, but also surprisingly efficient. You didn't scroll through dozens of strangers. You watched people you already knew step forward and prove themselves in the glow of firelight. And the comparisons keep coming. Think about swiping. Today, it's a flick of your thumb. Back then, it was your eyes deciding whether to follow the sway of someone's hips or let them pass back into the shadows. There was no endless catalogue of humanity. There was this small tribe, maybe 30 or 40 people, and once in a while a neighbouring clan joined. That was it. No upgrades to Tinder Platinum, no boosting your profile for extra visibility. If you wanted to stand out, you had to stand up, literally, and make yourself seen. Now imagine ghosting. Today, you match, you chat, then someone vanishes like smoke. Back then, you couldn't ghost anyone. They were still there the next morning, helping to fetch water, carrying wood, chewing roots. If you danced with someone one night and then pretended not to know them the next day, the entire tribe would notice. Gossip moved faster than Wi-Fi. Ghosting was impossible. You either addressed the awkwardness or risked losing everyone's trust. And catfishing, pretending to be someone you're not, oh, that existed too. Imagine someone draping themselves in furs from an animal they didn't hunt, or wearing beads traded from a faraway group, and acting as if they had carved them by hand. It was all show. And like modern catfishing, it worked only briefly, because soon enough, when the next hunt came, the truth was revealed. You either had the skill you bragged about, or you didn't. Modern profiles list interests, hiking, reading, trying new restaurants. The prehistoric version was performance. If you could mimic an animal convincingly, crouching and pouncing in rhythm with the drum, you showed both physical agility and humor. If you could sing loudly enough to rise above the crackle of the fire, you demonstrated stamina. If you could make people laugh mid-dance by slipping into exaggerated moves, you showed charisma. Everyone's bio was written in sweat, rhythm, and laughter. And of course, there was the problem of overselling yourself. Today, people inflate their height or strategically crop their photos. Back then, you might overpaint yourself, wearing too many feathers, looking like a startled bird rather than an elegant mate. Too much swagger could come across as arrogance. Too little flair, and you faded into the shadows. The balance was delicate. Show off, but show that you're still humble. A kind of prehistoric algorithm was always running in people's heads. Would this person share food? Would they help raise children? Would they dance again tomorrow? Dating apps promise variety. Rituals offered intensity. Everyone in the circle watched everyone else. There was no hiding behind messages, no clever gifs to mask awkward pauses. Your profile was your body, your voice, your willingness to join the ritual. That's a terrifying thought for modern introverts, but it was also strangely honest. You couldn't pretend to be someone else for long. The truth always showed in the way you moved, the way you laughed, the way you gave yourself to the group. And perhaps that's the biggest comparison of all. Today, dating apps can feel endless, disposable, like there's always another option. One swipe away. Back then, the ritual meant everything. This was your chance. This was your profile reveal, your big moment, your one shot to say, I am here, I am worthy, I am willing. And if your mammoth-hide leggings squeaked while you moved, well, maybe that was just your version of a bad haircut in a profile picture. Someone might still find it charming. When you think about it, the core hasn't changed. We still long for connection. We still dress ourselves up, polish our stories, try to catch someone's attention with humor or confidence. Only the stage has changed from the firelight circle to the glowing rectangle in your palm. The human heart is still swiping, still dancing, still waiting to be chosen. Close your eyes and imagine the smell. Smoke curling upward, fat sizzling on embers, the rich perfume of roasted meat drifting into the cold night. For our ancestors, this wasn't just dinner. This was the centerpiece of survival. But food was never just food. Every slice of meat, every marrow bone cracked open, carried meaning. It was nutrition, yes, but it was also status, politics, seduction. Meat was currency, and how it was handed out said everything about who mattered in the tribe. The hunt was dangerous, exhausting, and uncertain. Days might pass without success, but when a kill was made, the tribe celebrated and then negotiated. Who got the first bite? Who received the richest parts? These decisions mattered as much as the kill itself. Give the wrong person too little, and you insult them. Favor someone too much, and you spark jealousy. So the distribution of food became its own ritual, one that reinforced bonds, soothed rivalries, and sometimes whispered romantic intentions. Imagine a young hunter handing a choice rib to someone they admired. It was not subtle. The entire tribe noticed. This wasn't just calories, it was an invitation. To share food was to share your future. The message was clear. I value you enough to give you strength. Eat and remember me. And if the recipient accepted, biting into the gift with a smile, the bond was sealed with grease and laughter. Elders and shamans also wielded power through food. A shaman who distributed meat fairly was seen as trustworthy. An elder who made sure the sick received extra broth was respected. But they could also use food strategically, rewarding those who danced with enthusiasm during rituals, or quietly punishing those who sulked or refused to participate. A small cut of liver here, a meaty thigh bone there. These choices were as political as any council decision. The tribe knew that generosity was attractive. Someone who hoarded food was dangerous, signaling selfishness. Someone who gave food freely was magnetic, drawing others close. Romance often sprouted in these moments. The hunter who fed others became desirable not just for strength, but for their willingness to share. Generosity was seductive. Calories were love letters. Even beyond romance, food acted like social glue. To be invited to share the choicest cuts meant you were trusted. To be excluded meant suspicion. Meals were ceremonies where the community reaffirmed itself. Every distribution was a declaration. You belong. You are valued. You are part of us. And when two people fed each other directly, carving slices and passing them hand to hand, the tribe watched with knowing smiles. Desire had spoken through roasted marrow. The parallels to modern life are everywhere. Think of first dates at restaurants, where food is part of courtship. Think of how offering someone the last bite of dessert feels more intimate than words. Our ancestors were playing the same game, but with higher stakes. Their dinner tables were the savannah, their menus limited, their survival uncertain. To feed someone was to promise them tomorrow. So meat was more than sustenance. It was politics, seduction, and respect, rolled into one sizzling rib bone. The fire crackled, the grease dripped, and with every bite, relationships deepened or faltered. Food was currency, and the wealthiest were not the hoarders, but the givers, the ones whose generosity fed both body and heart. As you drift now, imagine yourself seated by that fire. Someone hands you a steaming cut, their eyes lingering just long enough. The tribe chuckles softly. the unspoken message clear. You bite, warmth spreading through you, not just from the food, but from the knowledge that you have been chosen. And in that moment, you understand, love has always tasted like sharing. The fire has burned low again, a cradle of red coals humming in the center of camp. The air smells of fat, char, and damp wool, and the people gather slowly, one by one, circling the glow like moths with opinions. And at the front of this gathering, not the biggest hunter or the fastest runner, not the loudest singer or the boldest dancer, but Granny. Yes, Granny, with her hair tangled into a crown of braids that have seen more seasons than anyone else alive, her teeth long gone, her knees creaking like branches in wind. And yet, the eyes of the whole camp wait on her gesture. She, not the muscled youth who killed the mammoth, might decide who gets the best rib. It seems strange to us, doesn't it? In our modern imagination, power belongs to youth. We plaster magazine covers with the smooth-skinned and symmetrical. We sell energy drinks with the promise of speed. But in the deep past, survival was less about speed and more about memory. And Granny was a library in a human body. She remembered the winters when food ran out and how the tribe endured. She remembered which berries had once poisoned a careless cousin. She remembered the face of every person who had given generously and every person who had taken too much. Her memory, combined with her lack of immediate hunger for dominance, made her a perfect judge. She had nothing to prove with her fists anymore. She had everything to offer with her wisdom. When the hunters dragged back a carcass, steaming and enormous, the first question wasn't just how to carve it, it was how to share it. And that's where Granny stepped forward, with her toothless grin and her endless patience. She could settle disputes with a look. She could decide that the rib should go to the dancer who lifted spirits last night, not the hunter who was already well fed. And if the hunter scowled, Granny would remind him, with a chuckle, that one day his knees would sound like hers, and he'd be glad someone remembered his kindness instead of his greed. The respect given to elders was not a sentimental luxury. It was a survival mechanism. A tribe without old women and men was a tribe without history. They were the keepers of patterns, the human equivalent of weather apps and recipe books combined. They also had a strange advantage. Being past childbearing years meant they could act impartially. No hidden agenda, no worries about their own offspring being favored. They could arbitrate fairly because they had nothing to gain except the tribe's continued existence. There's humor here too, because you can picture the scene. A ripped young hunter, sweat still drying on his chest, beams with pride, certain the choicest cut is his by right. But then Granny waddles forward, eyes twinkling, and hands that rib to the quiet neighbor who repaired her hut last week. The hunter swallows his pride, along with the less glamorous scraps, and everyone chuckles, knowing that strength without humility is as useless as a spear without a point. So the ribs, rich and dripping, might pass through Granny's hands before anyone else's. Her approval turned meat into more than calories. It became a blessing, a reminder that generosity was rewarded and selfishness remembered. And though her jaw might no longer chew tough sinew, her judgment chewed through egos better than any teeth could. This respect for elders still lingers in us, even if we bury it under noise. We still turn to grandparents for stories. We still feel, in quiet moments, that wrinkles carry maps we should follow. And if we forget, maybe it's because we no longer have mammoth ribs to hand out. But if you close your eyes, you can still hear her laugh, see the grease glisten in firelight, and understand why Granny, with no teeth, might have been the most powerful person at the feast. The next night's firelight, however, told a different kind of story. Imagine a circle, not of elders dividing meat, but of everyone gathered to watch something more vulnerable. The group ceremony, where intimacy became spectacle. There's a hush, then a murmur, then laughter, trying to cover nervousness. Everyone knows what's about to happen. Tonight is not just about food. Tonight is about desire, displayed in public, transformed into ritual, so the dangerous power of attraction could be tamed into something communal. Awkward is the right word. Imagine being 12 years old and watching your parents dance clumsily at a wedding. Multiply that by 10. Now imagine it happening around a fire, with no walls, no curtains, no privacy at all. Rituals of fertility were not whispered in bedrooms. They were acted out, dramatized, sometimes exaggerated to the point of parody in front of the entire group. Why? Because keeping it private was risky. Private attraction could split a group with jealousy. Public attraction, wrapped in song and dance, made it a shared joke, a safe performance. The dancers stepped forward, painted, adorned, maybe a little terrified. They swayed, they stomped, they mimed the act of creation in ways that were symbolic and sometimes cartoonish. The crowd watched, some chuckling, some blushing, some nodding solemnly. Children giggled, trying to copy the moves, until their parents shooed them back. Elders clapped in rhythm, encouraging but also policing, making sure the dance remained respectful, even as it flirted with comedy. It must have felt surreal. Imagine trying to perform sensuality while your aunt critiques your footwork and your grandfather coughs in the background. Imagine trying to be seductive while gnats bite your knees and someone's dog wanders into the circle. Awkward, yes, but that was part of the medicine. The spectacle took desire, which could divide and destabilize, and turned it into theatre, which united and entertained. Everyone watching wasn't just watching for scandal. They were learning. The youth saw what adulthood meant. The adults saw who could dance with confidence, who could make others laugh, who could handle embarrassment with grace. Participation mattered more than elegance. To step forward, to risk looking foolish, was a declaration of loyalty to the tribe. And the audience responded with respect. There's humor here too. Picture someone slipping in the dirt, mid-performance, landing on their backside, and the whole camp roaring with laughter. Not cruel laughter, but the kind that breaks tension, that says, "We've all been there." Or picture a shy young man trying to mimic the fertility gestures, blushing so hard his face outshines the firelight, and the elders smiling knowingly, remembering their own first times in the circle. The spectacle wasn't about perfection. It was about honesty, vulnerability, and trust. The awkwardness was the point. By laughing together at the strangeness of human desire, the tribe neutralized its sharp edges. Instead of jealousy festering in the dark, attraction was aired out in the open, turned into a performance everyone shared. In a way, it was the opposite of how we treat intimacy today. We hide it, privatize it, treat it as secret. But in those early camps, survival demanded transparency. Everyone had to know who was attracted to whom, who was loyal to whom, who was part of the web that kept the tribe together. These public ceremonies made sure there were no surprises, no hidden affairs threatening the group. Yes, it was awkward. Yes, it was spectacle. But it was also wisdom disguised as comedy. The awkwardness kept people humble. The spectacle kept people honest, and the laughter kept people bonded. When the dancers bowed, when the audience clapped and the fire hissed, the tribe was stronger. Desire had been transformed from a dangerous private flame into a shared fire everyone could warm themselves by. As you drift now, picture the scene fading, the dancers stepping back, sweaty and relieved, the audience dispersing, still chuckling, the fire crackling down to embers. The awkwardness dissolves into a kind of peace, because in that laughter, in that spectacle, the tribe remembered that they were one. And maybe, just maybe, you can feel the same warmth now, tucked under your blanket, as the fire inside you softens into sleep. The fire was not only heat, it was glue. When people gathered around it, they weren't just warming their hands and roasting scraps of meat. They were binding themselves together with invisible threads of trust and ritual. And this is where things get interesting, because from a purely survival standpoint, these odd public ceremonies, the awkward dances, the elders' judgment, the giggles of children at fertility pantomimes, they all made sense. They weren't just cultural quirks. They were evolutionary strategies. Imagine life without them. Imagine 30 people huddled together through winter with no shared rituals, no communal dances, no structure to food distribution or love. What happens? Arguments erupt like sparks from the fire. Who hunted more? Who gets the fattest portion? Who is sleeping with whom in secret? Without ritual, without binding ceremonies, suspicion festers. Suspicion leads to conflict. Conflict leads to fracture. And a fractured tribe in the Ice Age didn't just lose a bit of morale, they lost survival. The rituals, in all their silliness, solved that problem. They gave everyone a script. Participation was proof of loyalty. Laughter was proof of humility. Awkwardness was proof of honesty. And from an evolutionary perspective, these rituals were like fireproofing. They made sure the group stuck together instead of splintering. Consider the benefits. A tribe bound by ritual cooperated better during hunts. They defended one another against predators. They raised children communally, which meant fewer orphans and stronger generations. Rituals created a shared identity. We are the people who dance this way, who eat this way, who laugh at this joke. That identity was armor against outsiders and adhesive inside the group. The evolutionary payoff was enormous. Bound groups survived. Isolated individuals did not. Humor helped too. It might sound strange to think of laughter as a survival trait, but picture this. 2 hunters return empty, handed, exhausted, their pride wounded. Tension builds. But then, around the fire, a dancer exaggerates their stumbling return, turns it into slapstick. The tribe erupts in laughter. The shame is softened. And tomorrow, those hunters try again without bitterness. Laughter diffuses conflict, lowers stress, and builds bonds. Biologists today would point to lowered cortisol and increased endorphins. But the ancestors didn't need the science. They just knew that laughing together kept them together. Even the fertility dances, those awkward spectacles, had evolutionary logic. They taught young people what adulthood looked like, signaled who was available, and reduced secrecy that might split the group. Transparency built stability. Stability built survival. It all made sense. Groups with rituals. Groups that bound themselves through silly, awkward, funny traditions simply outlasted the ones who didn't. Genes passed forward, not just because individuals were strong, but because groups were united. Evolution didn't just select for sharp spears and strong legs. It selected for communities that could laugh at themselves, dance together, share food fairly, and respect Granny's toothless wisdom. So the next time you feel embarrassed at a wedding dance floor, remember, your ancestors did the same thing under the stars. And without their awkwardness, without their willingness to join the ritual, you might not be here at all. But what about the ones who didn't join? The people who stepped back into the shadows when the drum beat started? The ones who refused to laugh, who held themselves apart from the circle? Every ritual has its losers. In the prehistoric camp, failing the ritual wasn't like failing a test in school. There was no try again next semester. It was social death. Participation wasn't optional, because participation was proof of loyalty. If you didn't dance, if you didn't sing, if you didn't offer food when it was your turn, the tribe began to whisper. And whispers, in a group of 30, were louder than any drum. The losers weren't always bad people. Sometimes they were shy, or clumsy, or just unlucky enough to trip at the wrong moment. But ritual was about effort, not talent. The hunter who tried to dance, even if his knees knocked like loose stones, earned respect. The one who refused, arms folded, scowling at the circle, he lost status. Quickly, what happened to those people? At first, they might simply be teased. A joke here, a chuckle there. But teasing was serious business. It was social correction, the tribe's way of saying, "We need you to join." If the person still resisted, the consequences deepened. They might be given smaller portions of meat, not starved. No one wanted to look cruel, but subtly demoted. Their voice carried less weight in decisions. Their name drifted lower on the invisible ladder of trust. For those who continued to fail the ritual, the danger grew sharper. They risked being excluded from courtship, overlooked when alliances formed, ignored when stories were told. In the worst cases, they might drift to the margins of the camp, literally sitting further from the fire. And in the Ice Age, the margin was not safe. Warmth, protection, food, all were concentrated in the group. To be pushed out, even socially, was a sentence of hardship. Sometimes losers redeemed themselves. A clumsy dancer might tell a good story, make the tribe laugh, and climb back into respect. A shy youth might suddenly shine during a hunt, bringing meat to the fire, and be welcomed with cheers. But others never managed it. Some wandered off, joining neighboring clans if they would take them. Others stayed, tolerated, but not trusted, living on scraps and carrying the heavy weight of disapproval. It sounds harsh, but from an evolutionary standpoint, it made sense. The tribe could not afford free riders. Every person had to contribute to food, to laughter, to ritual, to trust. The ones who failed endangered the whole. And so, the tribe nudged, teased, punished, and, if necessary, cast them aside. There's humor here too, because failure was often dramatic. Imagine a man trying to impress during a fertility dance, tripping over his own feet, falling into the fire pit, and running out smoking like a poorly roasted rabbit. The tribe roared with laughter. If he laughed too, he was redeemed. If he sulked, his reputation suffered. The line between loser and legend was often just the ability to laugh at oneself. So the losers were not always lost. Some became beloved clowns, turning their failures into comedy. Others became cautionary tales, their names whispered as warnings. But every tribe needed that contrast. The winners of ritual shone brighter when losers stumbled, and the tribe, watching both, remembered what mattered: participation, humility, effort. If you close your eyes now, you can almost hear it. The drum, the singing, the laughter when someone stumbles, the quiet murmur when someone refuses to step forward. The warmth of the fire in the center, the cold at the edges, and you realize the line between belonging and exclusion was thin, but it was also fair. You didn't have to be graceful. You didn't have to be brilliant. You just had to try. And those who didn't, well, the Ice Age was not kind to loners. The losers of ritual often became the losers of survival. And that, too, made sense. The fire is low again, painting long orange shadows against the hides, stretched over wooden frames. It is a cold night. The sort of night that makes you pull your blanket tight and wonder how anyone survived before the invention of double glazing and fleece pajamas. But in the circle around the flames, something interesting is happening. Men and women are gathered, laughing softly, telling stories, and this is the part that would puzzle many modern eyes. Power is not where you think it island. If you've been taught to picture the Stone Age as one long parade of muscle-bound men dragging carcasses and women waiting silently by the fire, the reality would surprise you. Gender roles were far stranger, more flexible, and more unpredictable than we imagine. Hunting did favor muscle and speed. Yes, but muscle and speed didn't get you through childbirth, or gather 100 different plants, or keep children alive through the winter. Women were often the ones who knew which roots cured bellyaches, which berries wouldn't kill you, which streams were safe to drink from. This knowledge, in a world where diarrhea could end lives faster than a saber-toothed cat, was power. Imagine a brawny hunter scowling by the fire, ribs still sore from chasing a mammoth, and the old woman beside him calmly telling the tribe which mushrooms to avoid. In that moment, who was more vital, his spear or her memory? Power flipped unexpectedly all the time. When food came from a successful hunt, the men who had thrown spears strutted. Yes, but when food came from weeks of steady gathering, the women controlled the calories. No amount of flexing could change the fact that it was the women's baskets, heavy with nuts and tubers, that kept bellies full most days of the year. Archaeologists studying bone chemistry find that in many places, gathered plants contributed more calories to the diet than hunted meat, which means, in effect, the economy of survival often sat in women's hands. That is not the picture we usually get, but it is the truth. And then there was childbirth, a brutal frontier that no man could cross. Women who had survived many births carried scars of authority. They knew how to position a laboring mother, when to use herbs, when to heat stones for warmth. Their experience made them irreplaceable. The survival of new life was not in the spear arm. It was in the hands of women bent over another woman, whispering encouragement. And when the baby wailed and lived, everyone in the camp knew where the true miracle had come from. Of course, there were times when men reclaimed the spotlight, a spectacular hunt, a decisive defense against raiders, a clever invention, like a new spear point. All of these moments tilted power toward the hunters. But the tilt was temporary. The rhythm of life meant power swayed back and forth like branches in wind. This made sense, because survival required both. The men might bring down a bison, but the women made sure the meat was preserved. The children fed. The stories remembered. The rituals themselves often highlighted these flips. Fertility dances sometimes placed women at the center, celebrated as the givers of life. Men circled them, mimicking strength and bravado, but the laughter often turned when the women teased them, mocking clumsy steps, reminding everyone that the hunters were not as essential as they liked to think. In some ceremonies, women led the songs, their voices carrying rhythm, while men provided comic relief with exaggerated leaps. Authority wasn't fixed. It was playful, rotating, shifting with circumstance. And then there were the shamans, whose gender roles were sometimes not easily defined at all. Some shamans were men, some were women, and some seemed to live between categories, embodying a kind of fluid identity that made them mysterious and powerful. They could cross boundaries, others could not, and that very strangeness made the tribe listen. Power, once again, flipped unexpectedly, not to the strongest or the most fertile, but to the one who dared to walk between worlds. You can imagine the confusion of a time traveler arriving in such a camp, expecting a rigid patriarchy, and instead finding something much messier, much more dynamic. Women scolding hunters into fairness, men cradling infants, while women led songs. Elders of both sexes, wielding authority that eclipsed everyone else's. It was not equal in the modern sense, but it was not fixed either. Power belonged to whoever, in that moment, could hold the group together. It's a comforting thought, really. The fire burns, the night deepens, and power dances among the people like sparks, never still for long. And if you drift into sleep with this picture in mind, it might settle you. Survival was not about domination, it was about balance. Sometimes women led, sometimes men, sometimes neither. And that strange, unpredictable rhythm was the secret of endurance. Imagine the same camp on a different night. The air is warmer, the fire brighter, and the mood lighter. People are leaning in, not for judgment, not for ritual seriousness, but for play. Courtship is in the air. In our modern world, this might be the moment someone leans on a bar and says, "So, do you come here often?" But around this fire, pickup lines had a different flavor. Humor was always part of attraction. And if you want proof, just imagine a man sidling up to a woman and whispering, "Your fire is hotter than my flint sparks." It's terrible, it's awkward, and it probably worked, because humor was irresistible. In the harshness of Ice Age life, laughter was like oxygen. A person who could make you laugh proved two things: that they could lighten the unbearable weight of survival, and that they could be trusted not to crack under pressure. If someone could turn even hunger into comedy, you wanted them near you when winter howled. So, ancient pickup lines, whether whispered, sung, or acted out in goofy dances, were not wasted effort. They were survival strategies disguised as flirtation. Picture it. A man struts after a hunt, still smelling of sweat and smoke. He grins at a woman and says, "If I were a mammoth, I'd let you spear me." The group erupts in laughter. The woman rolls her eyes, but she's smiling. The pickup line has done its job. It's not about elegance. It's about courage. Humor is risk. To make a joke in front of everyone is to risk humiliation. To survive that risk and still laugh at yourself is to prove resilience. And resilience, more than muscles or pretty eyes, was what made you attractive in a world that could kill you with a frost or a famine. Women had their own arsenal of humor too. A woman might tease a hunter. "You call that a spear? I've seen straighter sticks on the ground." Everyone laughed, and the man laughed too, because to be laughed at was to be folded into affection. Playful mockery was a form of intimacy. The tribe thrived on it, because humor softened pride, deflated egos, and stitched the group together. The pickup lines were not always words. Sometimes they were gestures. A man tossing a morsel of meat to a woman, saying nothing, but wiggling his eyebrows until she laughed. A woman pretending to stumble, landing dramatically in someone's arms, then bursting out, laughing at her own clumsiness. The humor was physical, exaggerated, designed to entertain the group as much as woo an individual. Courtship was public theater, and the jokes were tickets to respect as much as love. Some lines surely failed, Someone probably said, "Your smile is brighter than the moon," only to have the moon peek out and prove them wrong. Someone probably compared a woman's beauty to a fresh mammoth carcass, thinking it a compliment, and earned nothing but awkward silence. But even failures were endearing, if the joker laughed first. To fail with humor was better than to remain silent. Silence meant disinterest, or worse, arrogance. Joking, however bad, meant you were willing to play. This playful spirit echoes through time. Our modern pickup lines are often groan-worthy, but they still work in the same way. They test humor, courage, and the ability to risk embarrassment. Humans haven't changed. The Ice Age man winking by the fire, and the modern person texting, "Are you French?" Because Eiffel, for you, are playing the same ancient game. Both are saying, "I want to connect, and I'm willing to look silly to prove it." So when you imagine that fire, the laughter, the bad jokes, the rolling eyes softened by smiles, remember that humor was the real courtship. Not muscle, not beauty, not even food. Humor was proof that this harsh world had not broken you. And if you could still joke about sparks and fire, someone would want to share theirs with you. And now, with that image in mind, let yourself relax. Hear the crackle of the fire, the muffled chuckles, the ancient one-liners drifting into the night. Feel the warmth of laughter as it wraps around the group, dissolving the edge of fear, carrying everyone a little closer. Even in the deep past, in the coldest nights, humor kept hearts beating together, and it still does. Food, fire, and desire, the three ancient forces that shaped not only how our ancestors survived, but how they understood themselves. If you close your eyes and picture a camp on the Ice Age steppe, you can almost see the triangle drawn in glowing lines. At the center is fire, the heart of the circle, crackling and warm. Around it are people, their bellies rumbling, their bodies tired, their hearts and imaginations alive. And in the air above it all, something less tangible, but just as real, desire. These three things did not exist separately. They fed one another, like logs feeding flames, like flames making meat edible, like meat fueling laughter and glances across the fire. Start with food. Without it, nothing else mattered. Hunting and gathering filled the hours of daylight, and every successful return to camp meant more than calories. It meant relief, security, and sometimes the excuse for celebration. But food was not private. A mammoth thigh couldn't be hoarded. It had to be shared. And the sharing itself was theater, full of meaning. Who received the first cut? Who was offered marrow? Who licked grease from their fingers? While others waited, these things weren't accidents. They were decisions, and desire often guided those decisions. A young hunter might accidentally pass the best rib to the woman he admired. A woman preparing broth might add a little extra portion to the bowl of the man whose dancing had impressed her the night before. To eat together was to court one another without words. But food needed fire. Without fire, meat spoiled quickly, parasites lingered, and meals lacked warmth. Fire transformed food into something richer, safer, tastier. And fire also transformed desire. Around the flames, faces glowed, shadows danced, and every gesture was amplified. Firelight is flattering in ways electric bulbs can never replicate. It softened scars, turned sweat into shimmer, and made eyes gleam like jewels. If you want to imagine the original candlelit dinner, it was not a restaurant with a table for two. It was a smoky clearing, a hissing log, and 30 people leaning in, half asleep and half enchanted. Desire Then was the bridge. It connected food and fire, wrapped them together into a single experience. Eating in the dark, cold, and scattered, inspired no romance. But eating by firelight, laughter ringing, the smell of roasted meat, mixing with the sound of song, this created the conditions for affection. You didn't just feed your stomach, you fed your sense of belonging, and belonging often blossomed into desire. There's humor in this, of course. Imagine the awkwardness of trying to flirt while gnawing on a greasy bone. Imagine whispering something charming while a bit of sinew dangles from your lips. Yet even then, even with faces sticky with fat, people found each other beautiful. Perhaps because beauty wasn't in perfection. It was in generosity, in laughter, in the way someone leaned across the fire to offer you a choice cut. When someone feeds you, when someone risks ridicule to make you laugh, you forget the grease. You see the glow. Food, fire, and desire were linked because together they built trust. Fire kept predators away, food kept bodies alive, and desire kept people close. Without desire, without the pull of affection and intimacy, the tribe might have drifted apart. But with it, they bound themselves together, not just with obligation, but with joy. And joy, in a world that often seemed hostile, was as essential as any spear. So when you think of those nights, think of the triangle. Think of a hunter dropping meat into the flames, the fat sizzling, sparks flying upward. Think of someone catching another's eye across the fire. Think of the laughter as grease drips onto fingers and tongues. This was not just survival. This was life, rich and human. Food feeding the fire feeding desire, desire feeding the heart, and all three feeding the tribe's future. Now imagine looking beyond humans, peering into the lives of our closest animal cousins. Bonobos, chimpanzees, gorillas, creatures who share so much of our DNA and yet behave in ways that reveal both our similarities and our eccentricities. If you want to understand just how creative humans became, you have to look at the animals and see the baseline. Then you'll see how far we've wandered and how strange, how inventive we truly are. Start with chimpanzees. They are often described as aggressive, political creatures. Male chimps fight for dominance, forming alliances, grooming one another as currency. Females, though powerful in their own right, often have to navigate the rough play of males by subtle strategies. Courtship is blunt, displays of strength, loud calls, even small gifts of meat when a hunt succeeds. Sound familiar? It should. Early humans were not so different. Strength impressed. Sharing food impressed more. But chimp courtship lacked the artistry of human rituals. There were no choreographed dances, no painted faces, no jokes about sparks and fire. Chimps courted with action, not theatre. Bonobos, on the other hand, are often called the hippies of the primate world. Where chimps fight, bonobos cuddle. They use intimacy not just for reproduction, but for conflict resolution, bonding, even bargaining. Two groups of bonobos meet, tension crackles, and instead of brawling, they get very affectionate, very quickly, and suddenly everyone is calm again. Desire, in bonobo society, is a social tool. It binds them together, prevents fights, and creates harmony. If that sounds like the fertility dances of humans, you're not wrong. But humans took this impulse and turned it into something more theatrical, more symbolic. Bonobos act. Humans act, and then perform the acting for an audience. Gorillas, meanwhile, rely on a different script. Silverbacks rule with sheer size, their deep chests and broad shoulders, intimidating rivals. Their dominance is visible in posture, in chest beating, in the thunder of their presence. Females choose mates partly by strength, partly by protection. Again, echoes of human life. The impressive posture of a hunter striding into camp with a carcass slung over his shoulders was not unlike a silverback pounding his chest, but humans added humor to the mix. Imagine if a gorilla, after chest beating, cracked a joke. That's where humans diverged. We weren't content with raw power. We wanted charm, wit, creativity. And that's the key, creativity. Chimps, bonobos, gorillas, they all show us the roots, but humans invented art, story, ritual, and laughter to turn attraction into something larger. Instead of simply mating, we danced for each other. Instead of simply offering food, we offered it with flair, sometimes even singing as we served it. Instead of resolving tension with cuddles alone, we built entire ceremonies to absorb jealousy and release it in laughter. It was risky, yes. Desire made us awkward. Our rituals sometimes looked absurd, but that absurdity was our genius. We were not content to copy bonobos, chimps, or gorillas. We wove desire into our creativity. We made it performance, memory, tradition, and in doing so, we made ourselves human. So the comparison teaches us this. Our cousins gave us the foundation, but we built the theatre. Where chimps had politics, we added comedy. Where bonobos had bonding, we added story. Where gorillas had posture, we added parody. Our creativity turned survival into culture, and culture into meaning. Close your eyes now, and let that sink in. We are the animal who dances in firelight, who paints our bodies, who turns pickup lines into poems and meals into theatre. Chimps, bonobos, gorillas remind us of our roots, but our creativity carried us into something new. And as the fire burns low, as sleep drapes over you, remember, you are the descendant of the only primates who thought a joke might be as important as a spear. And they were right. Step into the cool breath of a cave. It is dark at first, the kind of dark that feels alive, a dark that listens. Then, slowly, with a flicker of torchlight, images swim into being on the stone walls. They are not photographs, of course, but they are messages left by people who lived tens of thousands of years ago. You see animals, bison, horses, mammoths painted with strokes so careful they almost ripple with movement. And then, if you linger, you notice something else. Shapes, lines, bodies drawn with an unmistakable suggestion. Not just animals to hunt, but humans to desire. Archaeological evidence tells us that prehistoric people were not shy about mixing survival with sexuality. We like to imagine that cave art was a classroom chalkboard for hunting lessons. Stab here, avoid the horns. But some of those drawings look suspiciously like fertility symbols. Broad hips, swelling bellies, curves, emphasized in ways that no hunter would mistake for a mammoth. Figurines, too, carved from stone or ivory, often highlight the parts of the body linked to reproduction. The famous Venus figurines round, exaggerated, their faces absent, but their breasts and hips carved in bold relief were not fashion dolls. They were statements. They told stories about fertility, about abundance, about the mystery of life, continuing even when winter pressed in hard. Imagine someone, thousands of years ago, sitting in the dim glow of a fire, in a cave, whittling a small figurine out of bone. Each chip of the tool exposes more of the form. Slowly, the outline of a woman appears. No details of her face, no effort to make her look like a portrait, but every ounce of attention placed on the body. This was not art for art's sake. It was ritual magic, and maybe a prehistoric version of putting up motivational posters. Hang in there, we say today, with pictures of kittens. Back then, it was, we will survive. We will have children, expressed through a figurine, with exaggerated features. Some carvings went further into the suggestive. Archaeologists have found pieces that leave little doubt about their erotic inspiration. Phallic symbols etched into stone. Figures of couples in positions that make even modern observers raise an eyebrow. These weren't accidents. They were deliberate choices, placed where people could see them during ceremonies, near fires where stories were told. They turned desire into public memory, inscribing it on walls and bone so it would outlast the fleeting blush of a single night. Why would they do this? Partly for fertility. Life was precarious, death always near, and reproduction was the ultimate miracle. Every child born was a triumph against the odds. Emphasizing fertility through art was a way to call upon the mysterious forces of life, to remind everyone what they were fighting for. But it was also a way of acknowledging humor. Imagine a group of people, weary from the hunt, stumbling into a cave for shelter, and there on the wall is a carving so cheeky it makes them laugh out loud. That laughter wasn't frivolous. It was survival. Humor is warmth when fire burns low. Think of how brave it was, too, to etch desire into stone, to say with a steady hand, we are not only hungry animals, we are creatures who dream, who joke, who celebrate intimacy. These figurines and carvings were declarations of humanity's ability to turn even embarrassment into ritual. They remind us that our ancestors were not stoic cavemen grunting at shadows. They were artists, tricksters, lovers. They took what was awkward and private and made it communal, even sacred. So when you picture those caves, don't see them as cold museums of bones and dust. See them as theaters, lit by flickering fire, where people gathered to laugh, to marvel, to whisper. A figurine passed from hand to hand was not just an object. It was a story, a symbol, a kind of prehistoric emoji, carved in stone. The fact that so many survive tells us just how deeply these people wanted to preserve the dance of survival, food, and desire. Now step out of the cave and into something you know all too well. The fluorescent, lit corridors of an office or the echoing halls of a high school. The settings are different caves replaced by cubicles, animal hides replaced by blazers and backpacks. But the dynamics, they're startlingly familiar. Office politics and high school lunch tables are not so different from the circles of firelight, where our ancestors danced and shared meat. Think of the office break room. The smell of reheated leftovers hangs in the air. People cluster in groups. Some laugh too loudly. Some whisper in corners. Some hover awkwardly near the coffee machine. Isn't this just the modern version of sitting near or far from the fire? Those closest to the warmth, the popular crowd. The bosses are comfortable, confident. Those on the fringes feel the chill. The rituals are subtle now, but they're still rituals. Who gets invited to after-work drinks? Who gets the inside joke during a meeting? Who receives praise in public? And who is ignored? These are the echoes of food distribution around the fire, where meat was currency and laughter was a form of acceptance. High school lunch tables make the pattern even clearer. You walk into the cafeteria with your tray, scanning for a place to sit. Every table is a tribe. Athletes, theater kids, debate team, gamers. Each table has its own rituals, its own way of laughing, its own way of deciding who gets to sit where. Joining a table means proving loyalty, showing you know the script. If you sit at the wrong table, If you fail to join the ritual, maybe you don't laugh at the right joke, you feel the burn of exclusion. This is exactly how it felt in a prehistoric camp, when someone refused to dance or failed to share food properly. Belonging is everything. The bosses in offices and the queens and kings of high school, they are not always the strongest or smartest. Just like the elders or shamans of old, their power often comes from controlling ritual. The person who organizes the birthday cakes in the office suddenly has invisible influence. The student who always makes everyone laugh at the lunch table gains authority far out of proportion to their test scores. The dynamics are identical. Power comes not just from muscle or intellect, but from the ability to bind the group together. Even the awkward spectacles remain. Think of team-building exercises in offices, where co-workers are forced to play icebreaker games that make everyone cringe, or pep rallies in high school, where you're asked to chant slogans louder than your comfort level. These are just modern fertility dances, awkward ceremonies everyone watches, designed to remind the group of unity. Nobody enjoys them, yet everyone understands the point. Cohesion. Humor plays the same role too. In prehistoric times, a clumsy hunter redeemed himself by laughing at his own fall during a fertility dance. In high school, a student redeems a social misstep with a well-timed joke. In an office, an employee can survive a botched presentation if they make the room laugh afterward. The laughter isn't just amusement, it's forgiveness, a ticket back into the circle. And just like then, there are losers. The person who doesn't join the ritual, the worker who refuses the happy hour, the student who never finds a table. The tribe hasn't changed. The fire is just electric now. Exclusion still stings, because exclusion still threatens survival. If not physical survival, then emotional survival. Our nervous systems still read social rejection as danger. And in a sense, it island. No one thrives alone. Not in a cave. Not in a cafeteria. So when you notice these dynamics in your own life, when you feel the pull of politics or the sting of exclusion, remember, it's ancient. It's not your imagination. It's not even new. Humans have been managing this balancing act since the first sparks flew from flint. We are creatures of ritual, creatures who distribute food and jokes and approval as carefully as marrow from a bone. And perhaps this thought can comfort you. If office politics feel absurd, if high school hierarchies seem cruel, take a breath and imagine the fire. Imagine your ancestors making the same mistakes, laughing at the same awkwardness, struggling with the same questions of who belongs and who doesn't. Nothing has really changed. The circle is just drawn in different light. As you drift now, let that thought soften you. Your struggles are ancient. Your need for acceptance is written in bone. And the rituals that sometimes make you roll your eyes, they are the same ones that kept your ancestors alive. Office politics, high school lunch tables, cave dances, meat sharing, all are one continuous story of humans trying to stay warm together. There is something wonderfully absurd about it all. When you stop and think about it, imagine a universe vast beyond measure, stars burning for billions of years, galaxies colliding in silence, and down here, on this little blue planet, survival hinged on whether people could get together, paint themselves with ochre, and perform an intimacy dance without tripping over their own feet. It is both comical and profound. The absurdity lies in the fact that our ancestors weren't just hunting and building and surviving, they were performing. They were making a show out of desire, turning attraction into choreography, binding hunger to courtship, like mismatched socks that somehow still keep your toes warm. Think about the hunter who risked his life facing a mammoth, only to discover that his real test came later, when he had to wiggle his hips in a fertility ritual while the whole tribe clapped along, or the young woman who spent the day gathering roots and herbs, only to be pushed into the firelight at night, expected to sing or laugh in rhythm, proving her worthiness, not with calories, but with charisma. That's the joke the universe played. Survival wasn't simply about who could throw a spear straight. It was about who could make everyone else feel like they belonged, who could turn the frightening unknown of desire into a communal laugh. If you or I were transported back there, we might roll our eyes. Really? I have to humiliate myself in front of everyone just to prove I'm part of this tribe? But then, after a while, the logic seeps in. Without these ceremonies, there would be no cohesion. Without cohesion, there would be no survival. The absurdity starts to make sense. The rituals worked because they took something inherently private and awkward intimacy and stretched it out into something public and funny. By doing so, they stripped it of its ability to fracture the group. Instead of jealousy festering in shadows, everything was aired in firelight, turned into art, turned into comedy. Absurdity often hides wisdom. The people of the Ice Age might not have had equations, but they had intuition. They knew that hunger, sex, fear, and laughter were the strongest currents in human life. They couldn't dam those currents, but they could redirect them, channel them into rituals that protected the group. They exaggerated desire into dances, teased one another in public, and reminded themselves that everyone's survival was bound together. It might have looked ridiculous, but the ridiculousness was the point. And perhaps, if we are honest, we still live by the same absurd rules. Think of weddings today, full of rituals that make no rational sense if you take them apart. Tossing bouquets, smearing cake on faces, slow dancing under disco lights. These ceremonies don't feed anyone. They don't cure diseases. But they tell the group, we are united. We are celebrating together. The absurdity of ritualized intimacy never left us. It simply changed costume. We still thrive not only on calories and shelter, but on shared laughter and symbolic gestures that remind us of belonging. So the reflection settles like ash after flame. It is absurd, yes, but it is also profound. Survival was tied to ritualized intimacy because ritual made intimacy safe. Without the ceremony, desire could divide. With the ceremony, desire became glue, and glue was stronger than spears. Now picture the camp one last time. As the night grows heavy, the fire has burned down to glowing coals, their light gentle, like the heartbeat of the earth. The smell of roasted meat still hangs in the air, but the feasting is over. Bellies are full, bones cracked for marrow, scraps shared, even with the dogs curled in the shadows. The frantic urgency of survival has ebbed into quiet satisfaction. People stretch out on hides, murmuring, their voices soft as the crackle of embers. Children, sticky with grease and laughter, drift into dreams against their mother's shoulders. Hunters, their pride soothed by food and humor, lean back, eyelids heavy, content that tomorrow can wait. Elders sit closest to the fire, nodding slowly, their memories mixing with the present, their eyes half closed. They are guardians of this peace, but even they are slipping into the soft borderland of sleep. The fire itself seems to breathe. It sighs, collapses, then flares as a log shifts. Sparks rise, like tiny stars, vanishing into the dark sky that is itself overflowing with real stars. The heavens look down, infinite, and yet the tribe cares only for this circle of warmth, this pocket of light. In the vast night, here is safety, here is belonging. Desire has played its part. Laughter has smoothed the edges. Food has been shared fairly. The rituals, however strange, have done their job. The tribe is united. No one is left out in the cold. No one goes hungry. No one feels invisible. The absurdity of it all has become comfort. And in that comfort, sleep arrives. If you listen closely in your imagination, you can hear the rhythm of breathing. Dozens of people exhaling in unison, like waves against a shore. You can almost feel the warmth of the fire on your face, smell the faint sweetness of wood smoke clinging to your hair. The night is vast, but the fire is steady. The rituals are complete. The tribe is safe, and the world for now is kind. Let yourself sink into that same peace. Let your own breath join the rhythm of the camp. The fire crackles, the coals glow, and all around you is quiet. Sleep is no longer something to chase. It is already here, curling around you like fur, like blankets, like the gentle safety of the circle. Drift now, carried by warmth, into dreams. That's it for tonight's story. I hope you're already drifting, wrapped in warmth, safe as those fireside circles long ago. Sleep deeply, dream gently, and let tomorrow wait until morning. If you're still awake though, don't worry. You can click on one of the 2 videos glowing on your screen right now to keep the journey going. And if you enjoy these late-night wanderings through the strange corners of our past, make sure to subscribe, so you'll always have another story waiting when the night feels long. Good night, rest well, and I'll see you next time.